Historical Archive Disclaimer. The following audio-visual material is presented strictly for educational, documentary, and historical preservation purposes. This speech is part of Adolf Hitler's early interventions in the nascent National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, when the party was still small, marginal, and primarily addressed audiences of disaffected veterans, unemployed workers, and nationalist groups in Bavaria. It was delivered on April 12, 1922, in Munich. At that time, Germany was plunged into incipient hyperinflation, which would explode catastrophically in 1923, along with massive unemployment and deep-seated resentment toward the Treaty of Versailles of 1919. That treaty imposed enormous economic reparations on Germany, estimated at around 132 billion gold marks, forced demilitarization, territorial losses, and the infamous war guilt clause that branded Germany solely responsible for the Great War.
After the Great War, production began again. The people believed that better days were ahead. We had endured hardship. Yet we thought that through effort and perseverance, prosperity would return. Frederick the Great, after the 7 years' war, through superhuman labor, left Prussia without a single coin of debt. But at the end of the World War, Germany was left burdened not only by her own debts, 7 or 8 billion marks, but by the debts of the entire world, imposed as reparations. The fruits of German labor no longer belong to the German worker. They belong to foreign creditors. Day after day, trains loaded with goods rolled beyond our borders, carrying away the product of our toil. Every worker in Germany labored not only for his family, but also for a man across the frontier who would never see his face. A man who claimed the results of German effort as tribute. And even after 20 or 30 years of such labor, Germany would still owe billions. The harder she worked, the more she was chained. What would be the end of this road? The pledging of our land, the enslavement of our labor, the destruction of our sovereignty. Thus, November 1918 was not a triumph. It was the beginning of our downfall. Economically, it marked collapse. Politically, it meant humiliation. With the loss of our army came the loss of independence. With the loss of financial freedom came the domination of the Reparations Commission. Germany, once proud, had become a colony of the outside world, and we ourselves contributed to this. We humiliated ourselves before others. We tore down our own dignity, mocked what was once sacred, and denied our honor. They told us the revolution had brought social gains. These gains are invisible, as elusive as the wind. Someone says, we have the 8-hour day. But was the collapse of the nation necessary to achieve that? And how long will it remain? When one day the foreign creditor commands, you must work longer. We are told that the people now rule. Yet for 3 years no one has asked the people's opinion. Treaties have been signed that will bind us for centuries. Were they signed by the people? Number they were signed by governments that appeared overnight, proclaiming themselves the people as representatives. Freedom, they say, has come through revolution. But where is this freedom? Certainly, the individual can walk down the street, enter his workshop, or attend a meeting. Yet if he is wise, he will keep silent. Once, men feared offending a king. Now, they fear offending a politician. And who profited from this revolution? The banks and the stock exchanges. We were told capitalism would be destroyed. Yet the financiers are more powerful than ever. The worker has not gained freedom. He has merely changed his master. Those who once promised liberation have delivered only dependency. They said, capitalism will be crushed. But when some reminded them, even Jews have capital, the reply was, do not worry, all capitalism will vanish. Yet it did not vanish. It transformed. Industrial capital suffered. Financial capital grew. The international stock exchange, that supranational power without borders, flourished amid our ruin. Those who controlled it saw themselves not as members of nations, but as rulers of them. While the German worker struggled to survive, others grew wealthy from his misery. He went to the mountains or health resorts once in a lifetime, seeking fresh air and rest. Others went there to shed excess fat, enjoying luxuries he could never imagine. They were not the working class, not the men who toiled with their hands or their minds. They lived apart, surrounded by privilege. Meanwhile, in the East, millions suffered hunger, Yet even there, a new class of rulers lived in luxury. Men who called themselves servants of the people, while the masses starved, they traveled by express train, lived in fine hotels, and watched dancers perform for their pleasure. Thus, everything that the worker thought he had won for himself slipped away into other hands. The treasures he seized from the old bourgeoisie became meaningless trinkets. Gold and jewels could not feed his family. Bread, now controlled by the state, was rationed and withheld. And who controlled the state? Those who had deceived him, those who spoke of equality, while building new forms of domination. My countrymen, can we believe that such men will ever end the revolution? They will not. They profit from chaos. They thrive in confusion. To end it would be to end their power. If any one of them were suddenly struck by conscience and stood before the people to confess, "We have deceived you, we have led you to misery," he would be torn apart in the public square. They cannot speak the truth, for truth would destroy them. Yet among the masses, a new current is stirring, a current of awakening. The people are beginning to see through the lies. The realization spreads slowly but irresistibly that they have been betrayed. And when that realization takes hold, no power will stop it. The old leaders see it coming. They sense the growing anger behind them. They turn to extremism, hoping to save themselves by dividing the nation further. They know that as long as brain and hand remain apart, as long as intellectuals and workers are set against one another, they can rule without fear, for a divided people cannot resist. But the day will come when the idea of socialism will no longer belong to those who use it to destroy nations, but to those who combine it with national pride and unity. When that day arrives, the system built on deception will crumble. Then those who have corrupted both labor and faith will see their downfall. And in their desperation, they will attempt one last act to bring catastrophe upon the nation before their own ruin, to drag Germany into chaos so that none may survive them. The left will not help us. It cannot. Its first lie compels it to invent new lies. But what of the right? The right means, well, yet it fails to act. It has not understood the danger. It believes politics is a game of elections and offices, not a struggle for existence. They still believe that the destiny of a people can be decided in parliaments and ministries, that the worst outcome is merely the loss of comfort or position. They have not grasped that this struggle threatens their very lives. They do not see that one does not need to be an enemy of the revolution to become its victim. One need only have a head upon one's shoulders. And because they do not understand this, their actions remain timid and small. They would like to act, yet they hesitate. They would like to resist, yet they debate. They fail to grasp the magnitude of the age they live in. Another great error lies in their confusion between national and dynastic. They think loyalty to a house or a monarch equals loyalty to the nation. They do not see that the national idea must stand far above petty politics, above daily quarrels, above the ambitions of individuals. What we must say day after day is this: we want to bury all minor divisions and bring to the light the great things that unite us, our blood, our culture, our will to live as one people. When every German heart beats for Germany alone, then and only then will unity be born. How the future state may shape itself, monarchy or republic, matters little compared with this higher duty that all Germany be free and united. When that day comes, the form of government will arise naturally from the character of the people. And here lies yet another truth. We must free ourselves from all class thinking. It is easy to call out to the worker, "Forget you are proletarian," while the bourgeois proudly declares himself a part. In one nation there can be only one highest right, the right and honor of honest work. Work must be the bond that joins all citizens, the foundation of the state. Without it, no nation can endure. Yes, a government must possess power, and it must press forward with strength. But even the harshest rule can succeed only if it serves the welfare of the people. Frederick the Great ruled as an enlightened despot because his every act was guided by one thought: the welfare of Prussia. It was this that made his authority not merely tolerated but loved. The right has forgotten this lesson. It forgets that democracy, as practiced today, is not German in spirit. It has become a tool in the hands of those who manipulate opinion for profit. Every issue is thrown before the crowd. Whoever can most skillfully deceive becomes master. And who are the masters of deception? Those who make lying an art. Thus truth is silenced and corruption parades as virtue. Germany cannot stand forever between extremes. The middle, the party of compromise, will be swept aside. One day the people will turn to those who foretold the ruin and sought to avert it. Then there will be only two paths, to the left leading to destruction and chaos, or to the right determined to seize the reins of destiny and rebuild from the ashes. There can be no compromise. Either the German nation survives or it perishes. Either it conquers despair or it is annihilated. It was this recognition that gave birth to our movement. Two principles were engraved upon our hearts. First, to see the facts with sober clarity. Second, to proclaim them with ruthless honesty. From these truths flowed the foundations of our program. The words national and social are not enemies but twins. The Jew, by falsifying the social idea and turning it into Marxism, sought to separate them, to set nation against labor, labor against nation. He succeeded for a time, but we declared from the beginning that we would reunite what belongs together. To be national means to love one's people with boundless devotion, even unto death. To be social means to build a community so upright and just that each man would willingly sacrifice himself for it. There are no classes among Germans. There is but one people. Differences of occupation, of skill, of craft, yes, but no division that severs the ties of blood. The honest worker of hand or mind, the craftsman, the farmer, the engineer, all belong to one brotherhood. What separates us should never outweigh what binds us. The idler, the parasite, he alone stands outside. Labor is the measure of worths. Work must unite the nation and also distinguish the deserving from the unworthy. The drone is the foe of all. The creator, whether he wields pen or hammer, is the nobility of the state. True work is that which benefits the whole community. It is the lifeblood of the nation. And this understanding, we believed, sprang from our very race and heritage. Different races view work differently. To the Aryan, labor is the foundation of communal life. To others, it is merely a means of exploitation. Thus arises the eternal conflict between those who create and those who consume without producing. From this perspective, we declared that economic independence cannot exist without political freedom. Internationalism, we said, is a house of lies. Freedom is born of strength, and strength is born of will. Therefore, the will to power must burn fiercely within the people. We proclaimed that we, as National Socialists and as German workers, must be the most fanatical nationalists of all. For only when the German holds his destiny in his own hands will his homeland be a paradise. A slave state can never be a paradise, only a prison. Power, we taught, does not rest in numbers, but in energy, in faith, in the courage to act. Even a small band, if filled with conviction, can change history. A truth once discovered is worthless unless carried into action by indomitable will. These were the foundations of our movement, the truths upon which it stood and from which its necessity arose. For 3 years, we struggled to bring these principles to light. It was not easy. Every warning we spoke was mocked as agitation. Every protest we made was condemned as treason. We opposed the Treaty of Versailles, calling it a crime against the nation. We resisted the surrender of arms, for to disarm is to submit. We warned against the ruinous financial policy that now drags us toward collapse. Each time, the answer was the same: agitators. Yet we were right. We were the first to point to a danger that crept quietly into our midst, a danger that millions failed to recognize, yet one that would bring ruin to our people if left unchallenged. We spoke of it openly when others remained silent. For this too, we were called agitators. Count Lurchenfeld once stood in the Landtag and declared that his feelings as a Christian prevented him from being an anti-Semite. I say my feeling as a Christian points me to my Lord and Savior as a fighter, not only as one who suffered, but as one who struggled for truth. It points me to the man who, surrounded by only a few followers, saw clearly the corruption in his time and took the scourge to drive the money changers from the temple. He fought against those who had poisoned the life of his people. In deepest conviction, I believe this was the struggle for which he shed his blood upon the cross. As a Christian, I do not believe it is my duty to allow my people to be deceived and exploited. It is my duty to fight for truth, for justice, and for the survival of our nation. 2,000 years ago, ancient Rome collapsed under the same corruption and greed. Then new Germanic tribes came down from the north and renewed civilization. But if Germany falls today, who will come to renew it? There are no new tribes waiting beyond our borders. German blood itself will perish from this earth unless we rouse ourselves and break our chains. And if anything proves that our cause is right, it is the deepening distress of our people. For as a Christian, I have a duty to my own nation. When I walk the streets and see men standing in lines for bread, when I look into their weary faces, when I see mothers struggling to feed their children, I would be no Christian but a devil if I felt no pity. And like my Lord 2,000 years ago, I must turn against those who rob and exploit the poor. The suffering of the German people grows each day. Many accuse us of stirring up passions. But I say, passion already burns in every hungry stomach and every hopeless heart. We did not create that passion. It was born of misery. The question is not whether it will break out, but in what direction it will go. Shall it destroy, or shall it rebuild? To those who call us agitators, I ask, what faith do you offer the people? What belief you give them to hold on to in this hour of despair? You have none. You yourself no longer believe in your own words. That is why our movement must give them something new, a faith, a conviction, a vision strong enough to lift them from confusion and hopelessness, a faith that can unite them and restore their dignity. We have been mocked, persecuted, and silenced, yet we remain. We will continue to speak of truth, of work, of unity, for in that truth lies Germany's resurrection. Our movement does not promise ease, but struggle. It does not offer comfort, but duty. It demands from every German the strength to sacrifice, the courage to endure, and the will to believe again. We do not seek vengeance, but renewal. We do not fight to destroy, but to rebuild. And in this fight, we will not falter, for every hour of despair brings us closer to awakening. Every blow of hardship forges a stronger will. Every moment of humiliation reminds us of what we must rise above. When the people once again stand together as one, workers, farmers, thinkers, soldiers, bound not by fear but by faith, then Germany will live again. We will find our strength not in gold, not in treaties, not in foreign mercy, but in the heart of every man and woman who still believes this nation can rise. That is why we speak, though condemned as agitators, because silence would be betrayal. We speak for those who have no voice. We speak for a future where work is honored, justice is real, and freedom belongs to the people once more. And so we give this pledge to restore faith in the nation, to rebuild unity from ruin, to turn despair into purpose, so that out of darkness, Germany may once again find the light.
Thank you for watching. Study the past to build a better future. Check the gear icon to switch between the original historical recording and localized narrations.